Emma had always loved the thrill of the open road, so when she decided to hitchhike across the country, she felt exhilarated. The sun was setting as she stood by the roadside, thumb out, her backpack slung over her shoulder. After a long wait, a dusty sedan pulled over, and the driver, a middle-aged man with a charming smile, waved her in. "Where to?" he asked, his voice friendly. "Just heading to Riverwood," Emma replied, settling into the worn seat. As they drove, they chatted about music and travel, and Emma felt a strange sense of safety. But as the landscape changed, trees closed in around them, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. The man's demeanor shifted, his smile becoming unsettling. "You know," he said, glancing at her, "this road has a reputation. A lot of people don't make it out here." Emma's heart raced, but she laughed it off. "Just urban legends, right?" He didn't answer, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. The air grew thick with tension as they continued down the desolate road. Suddenly, the car lurched, and the engine sputtered. "Just a little hiccup," he muttered, pulling over. Emma's stomach dropped as he stepped out to inspect the hood. She could see the trees swaying in the wind, whispering secrets. Alone in the car, her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she stayed put, unease settling in. After a few moments, he opened the door, his expression dark. "Looks like we're stuck." "I'll need your help." "Help with what?" Emma asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Just a little favor," he said, stepping closer. "There's something in the trunk I need to get." Panic surged through her. "I think I should go." "Oh, I don't think so," he said, his voice cold and menacing. Before she could react, he lunged for her, but she scrambled out of the car and ran into the woods, branches scratching her arms. The night swallowed her as she stumbled through the underbrush, heart pounding. Behind her, she heard him cursing, his footsteps crashing through the leaves. "You can't hide from me," he shouted, voice echoing with rage. Desperate, Emma ducked behind a tree, holding her breath as she listened to his footsteps grow closer. Just when she thought he'd pass, he stopped, silence enveloping the woods. Come out," he called, a twisted glee in his voice. "I just want to talk." Shivers ran down her spine. She could feel his eyes searching, probing the shadows. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Finally, mustering every ounce of courage, Emma sprinted deeper into the woods, not daring to look back. She could hear him behind her, taunting her, the thrill of the hunt evident in his voice. "Why run? It'll only make it more fun." The moon illuminated a small clearing ahead, and she dashed toward it, desperate for a way out. But just as she broke through the trees, she found herself face to face with an old, dilapidated cabin. With no other choice, she rushed inside and slammed the door, heart racing. Inside, it was dark and musty, cobwebs hanging in every corner. She pressed her back against the door, listening intently. Heavy footsteps approached, and her heart sank as the door rattled. "I know you're in there," he called, a sinister edge to his voice. "You can't hide forever." Emma searched the room frantically for a weapon, finding nothing but broken furniture. The door creaked ominously as he pushed against it, the wood splintering under his weight. "Let's play a game," he said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. As he forced the door open, she grabbed a shard of glass from the floor, heart racing. "Stay back," she shouted, voice trembling but defiant. The door burst open, and he stepped inside, eyes wild with excitement. "Oh, you've got some fight in you." Emma lunged at him, slashing the glass toward his arm, but he dodged, grabbing her wrist and twisting it painfully. "You're not going anywhere." In a desperate surge of strength, she kicked him in the knee, and he stumbled back, releasing her. She darted past him and out of the cabin, the night air hitting her like a wave. The chase resumed, the woods closing in around her. But she had to keep moving, driven by sheer survival instinct. As she pushed through the underbrush, she spotted the road in the distance, a glimmer of hope. But just as she reached it, she heard a chilling laugh behind her. "Did you really think you could escape?" Before she could react, he grabbed her again, spinning her around. Emma fought back with all her strength, but he was too strong. "Enough games," he growled, pinning her against a tree. "It's time to finish what I started." In that moment, she remembered the old tales of the road, of hitchhikers who vanished without a trace. A surge of desperation filled her as she spotted a broken branch nearby. With a swift movement, she grabbed it and swung it at his head with all her might. He staggered back, surprise etched on his face, and she seized the moment, sprinting down the road. Headlights appeared in the distance, and she waved frantically, praying someone would stop. The car slowed, and a woman's voice called out, "Are you okay?" "Help, please," Emma shouted, stumbling toward the vehicle. The driver jumped out, a look of concern on her face. "Get in." Emma jumped inside just as the man emerged from the trees, rage burning in his eyes. The driver quickly sped away, leaving him behind. As they drove, Emma looked back, heart racing, the horror of what had just happened washing over her. "Are you all right?" the driver asked, concern etched in her features. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was going to die." "You're safe now," the woman reassured her. "I'll get you to the nearest police station." But as they drove into the night, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't escaped. The darkness lingered, and the echoes of his laughter haunted her every thought. She had survived, but the road would never feel the same again. Jake was eager to escape his mundane life, so he decided to hitchhike across the state to find adventure. One afternoon, he stood by the side of a lonely highway, thumb out, with the sun dipping low. After an hour, a rusty pickup truck pulled over. The driver, an older man with a scruffy beard and a wide grin, waved him in. "Where to?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Just heading to Pine Valley," Jake replied, settling into the worn seat. As they drove, the man shared stories of the road, how the woods were beautiful but also dangerous. "You know, some people go missing out here," he said, chuckling. Jake laughed nervously, brushing it off. But as they entered a dense stretch of forest, the atmosphere shifted. The trees loomed overhead, and shadows danced in the fading light. The man's laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Suddenly, the truck sputtered and stopped. "Just a little trouble," he said, but Jake noticed the unease in his voice. The driver stepped out, opening the hood. Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Glancing at the trees, he sensed something was off. Before he could think twice, he pushed the door open and slipped out, moving cautiously away. "Hey, where are you going?" the man called, but Jake ignored him, heart racing. He sprinted into the woods, branches whipping against his face. Behind him, he heard the man's footsteps crashing through the underbrush, his voice growing more frantic. "Get back here!" Panic surged through Jake as he pushed deeper into the forest. He stumbled over roots and fallen branches, fear driving him forward. Finally, he stopped to catch his breath, pressing his back against a tree, listening intently. The footsteps grew closer. "Come on, Jake, it's all a joke," the man shouted, but there was no humor in his tone. Jake felt his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced around, spotting a narrow path that veered away from the noise. He took a deep breath and dashed down it, hoping for a way out. The path twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the woods. Suddenly, he stumbled into a clearing and froze. In the middle stood an old cabin, weathered and eerie, the windows dark. Desperate, Jake rushed to the door and knocked frantically. No answer. He tried the handle, it was unlocked. He pushed it open, stepping inside, the air thick with dust and neglect. He heard the man's voice outside, "Closer now. I just want to talk. You can't hide forever." Jake's breath quickened. He searched the room for anything to defend himself. The cabin was empty, save for a few broken chairs and an old table. He spotted a rusty crowbar in the corner and grabbed it, heart pounding. The door creaked as it swung open, and the man stepped inside, eyes wild with something dark. "There you are," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I told you it was just a game, no more games," Jake shouted, brandishing the crowbar. "Oh, but you'll play," the man replied, stepping closer. "You're just part of the fun." Jake's instincts kicked in. He swung the crowbar, catching the man off guard and knocking him back. The man stumbled but quickly recovered, rage flashing in his eyes. "You think you can escape," he snarled. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake dashed past him, out the door, and into the woods again. He ran blindly, fear propelling him forward. He didn't stop until he reached the highway, where he collapsed, gasping for breath. A car approached, and he waved frantically. It slowed, and a woman leaned out, eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay? Please, just drive," he shouted, and she opened the door, allowing him to jump in. As they sped away, Jake glanced back, the trees fading into the distance. Relief washed over him, but deep down, he knew the terror of that ride would haunt him forever. He had escaped, but the memory of the stranger in the woods lingered, a reminder of how quickly safety could turn to nightmare. In the late 1970s, a young man named David was driving through a remote area of Northern California. It was late at night, and the road was empty. He was tired and looking forward to reaching his destination when he spotted a figure on the side of the road. A woman was standing there, her thumb outstretched. Feeling sympathy, David pulled over. The woman, appearing to be in her 20s, climbed into the passenger seat. She had disheveled hair and looked distressed. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her voice trembling. "I was at a party, and I just need to get to the nearest town." David nodded, but as they drove on, he sensed something was off. She kept glancing nervously out the window, as if she were expecting someone to follow them. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I think someone is looking for me," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. David felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "I think they might be coming for me," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Just then, headlights appeared behind them, quickly closing the distance. David's heart raced as the car pulled up beside him. It was a dark sedan with tinted windows. He could see two shadowy figures inside. "Drive faster," she urged, panic rising in her voice. David pressed the gas, but the sedan matched their speed, keeping pace. He could see the figures leaning forward, their faces obscured. The woman was trembling now, her fear palpable. "Who are they?" David shouted over the engine noise. "They're after me," she screamed, her eyes wide with terror. "Please, just get away from them." With adrenaline pumping, David swerved off the road onto a gravel path. The sedan followed, tires screeching as they veered behind him. The woman was now crying, urging him to drive faster. Suddenly, he spotted a small cabin in the woods. Desperate, he turned toward it, hoping to find help. He slammed on the brakes in front of the cabin and jumped out, motioning for her to follow. But when he turned to grab her arm, she was gone. Confused, he spun around, searching the truck's interior, but she had vanished without a trace. Panic set in. The sedan pulled up and stopped a few feet away, the figures inside now watching him intently. Before he could react, the car door swung open, and two men stepped out, their faces now visible under the cabin's flickering porch light. One of them smiled chillingly. "Thanks for bringing her to us," he said. Realizing he had unwittingly become part of a deadly game, David bolted back to his truck, heart pounding. The men chased after him, but he managed to scramble inside, fumbled with the keys, and started the engine just as they reached the door. He sped off into the night, glancing back to see the men standing in the road, their faces twisted with rage. David didn't stop until he reached the nearest town, shaken and terrified. He reported the incident to the police, but when they investigated, they found no trace of the woman or the cabin. Just an empty stretch of road with no signs of a party or anything unusual. To this day, David wonders about the hitchhiker he picked up, haunted by the knowledge that some things are better left alone. Some passengers carry dark secrets that can lead to terrifying fates. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.